Appreciate that.
This is Dorie Clark, and we are live here with the wonderful author of the new book just released on Tuesday, Jenn Lim. Let's get it. We've got the shiny glaze of the diva light here, but it is Beyond Happiness by Jenn Lim. We are here with our weekly Newsweek interview show, Better. Jenn Lim, it's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Dorie. It's really an honor. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, welcome to everyone here who is tuning in. Please feel free to type into the chat box and let us know who you are, where you are calling in from, and any questions that you have about happiness and moving beyond it with Jenn Lim. So, Jenn, the first question that I have, your title is provocative in the sense that I think for many people, now I've read your book and loved it, but for people, browsing on the bookshelf looking for this, they might say, beyond happiness, why do I need to be beyond it? Isn't happiness itself the goal? What do you mean by this title, and what are you aiming to accomplish with the book?
Yeah, so I've been running a company called Delivering Happiness for so long now. It's been 11 years. And so when I started working on this next book, and it was supposed to be about sharing all the stories of what's going on with organizations, how we've helped them infuse scientific happiness into their lives. Then 2020 happened, and it happened to everyone. And there was like this reset of humanity, I thought. And, with every successive event that happened in our lives, I felt like I had to sit down and rewrite, the book again, because it was just not enough. Like happiness, as what we've seen in its own form, is super important, of course, but because of what we've seen in the last 18 plus months, I just felt like there had to be more, and so I had to dig deeper within. And then for me, seeing all that people had to endure and go through, both from a work side and a life side, and then me personally having to go through a sense of grief and loss, my business partner Tony Shea, and I know everyone in the world had to go through some sort of loss and grief. So that's why I didn't even come up with the title till after, like towards like the time I had to hit send on the manuscript, and it became very clear to me that it's not, happiness is not quite enough. By moving beyond it for ourselves and organizations, it really is infusing the sense of humanity, of where we are, so that we're actually interacting, not just on the highs and rainbows and unicorns, but we're also dwelling and thinking and sinking and embracing our lows. So not just our strengths, but also our shadow sides. Just being at peace with that. And actually, one of the quotes that inspired me during this whole last 18 months was Rumi's, the cure for pain is in the pain. And I felt that was really strong in terms of like a reminder for me in my processing. And I wanted to expand that whole notion of we can actually be not just happy, but also beyond it with humanity, and actually run profitable, successful, adaptable organizations in the end.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Thank you, Jenn. That's great. We want to say hi to some of the great folks who are tuning in. Karen's here from Boston, Cheryl from Minneapolis, St. Paul, Varsha's in the house, Anna's here from New Hampshire, Alana's here from Denver. David is
Awesome.
a particular fan, so that's great. Welcome to all of you and more. Please, again, type into the chat box. Let us know where you are calling in from and questions that you have for Jenn Lim, author of Beyond Happiness. Now, Jenn, a key part of the book, your subtitle, is how authentic leaders prioritize purpose and people for growth and impact. Talk to me about the role of purpose here. How does that tie in with happiness? How does that actually tie in to achieving what we want in our lives? And if you're somebody who is a little bit adrift at the moment, as we're coming
Mm.
out of COVID, where do you even start to try to figure that out?
Yeah, so purpose, is actually really strongly tied into happiness, and scientifically, that's where our basis of our company came from. That's how we took the learnings from Zappos into bottling it up into a framework that actually can be more universal. So what's been studied and basically understood time and time again, we can have all these different levers of happiness that can increase, what's right with us in terms of having a sense of autonomy, having a sense of control of our decisions, progressing in life, developing in life, having meaningful connections. But time and time again, the most sustainable form of happiness comes back to that higher purpose. And essentially, it is, doing something that's bigger than yourself. And for organizations, is doing something that's bigger than just making more money. So that was always, our premise for the last 11 years and what we did for companies. But I think it didn't ring even, I mean, it rang even more truer in the last 18 months of us having quite a bit of time of reflection. And instead of, people are calling this the great resignation, I really feel it's a great awareness where people are actually going deep within themselves. And this idea of purpose can sound really daunting, and you get kind of sometimes feel you don't know where to start. But I really wanted to make this book as practical as I could and share exercises that people can just think about and know that don't get set on feeling that once you have a purpose that is set in stone, is constantly evolving. And so there's 3 questions I ask in the book. Number 1 is, if you don't have a purpose statement yet, or if you do, just revisit with these 3 questions. Is number 1, what energizes you? And this is not necessarily positive energy. It could be like fiery energy too, like basically what, pisses you off in the world. And it could be climate change, it could be social injustice, whatever it is that makes you feel that sense of fire and energy. The second thing is talent. And of course, that sounds really simple. We all think we have these talents, which is great. One way to test for that is to take a second to reflect the people that you really respect. What are they coming to you for? Because then they can see what's naturally shining out of what bring to the table that's unique and different and better, or than anyone else can. And then the third thing is impact. If you're just to think really quickly what kind of impact you would like to make, whether it's at work or in your sphere of life. And if you answer those 3 questions on their own, piece them together in a way that forms a really nice draft of what your purpose could be. And what we've seen is that it makes such a huge difference, because when you have that purpose statement and all these things are swirling around you that you cannot control, then at least you can base your decisions on what means the most to you, rather than try and figure out what you think you're supposed to do, but actually intrinsically who you are as an authentic person and leader of your life.
Well, that's really powerful advice. Thank you for that, Jen. And we just want to greet some of the terrific folks who are tuning in. Jerry's here from Long Island. David's from Indianapolis. We have Adedoyan coming in. We have Jefferson from Brazil. Maria's tuning in from
Nice.
Stockholm. We're so glad to have such an international crowd. Welcome to all of you, and type your questions in for Jenn Lim. She's the author of Beyond Happiness. And if you're enjoying this conversation, you can learn more about Jen. Go to her book and go to her website at jennlim.com. And if you want to make sure you never miss one of these conversations, you can follow me on LinkedIn and subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter. Go to dorieclark.com/LinkedIn. You will get updates and reminders about our weekly Newsweek conversations, which come in handy. So, Jen, a question that I have for you now, zooming out from the book specifically, for years
Mhm.
you have been running an organization called Delivering Happiness, and the goal of the organization, as I understand it, is to really infuse the workplace with humanity and authenticity. And I wanted to get a sense from you, as someone who has spent years consulting on this question, what are a few tips that you have for someone who might be watching today that is a leader in their company, and at whatever level, and they say, yes, that is what we want to do? What are some ways that they can actually get started and begin that process?
Yeah, of course. And what I love also, the fact that it's an international crowd that's joining this, is that half of our clients throughout the years from the very beginning were international. And that was surprising for a lot of people, because they think happiness is kind of a Western idea. And historically, it has been in some ways. But the reality is, because where we are has I mean, especially with, this pandemic and everything that's happened, it's made happiness more of a um, universal theme that we as just human beings, again, going back to that sense of how do we interact and connect as humans and humanity, has really been spotlighted. So as a leader, and I love the way you phrased the question, because you don't have to be the CEO to be the leader. You can be the CD, you don't have to be a manager. Actually, you can pull people together in a team, knowing that if you believe in this and you want to make this happen, you can. Just carve, like what you can feel like will bring you that level of success. So some simple tips, and what's great about this is that even if you don't have the budget for it per se, this is more about how we can tap into things that will draw us together and make us more, connected and successful teams. So as a leader, we talked about purpose already, and the next thing we talk about is values and making behaviors out of those. So when you do these kind of exercises, for example, so that was a purpose, exercise that I just named. But if you do it with all your team, as an example, or your whole organization, then the conversation gets so much more deeper. And so the the water cooler is a little different now, but it just doesn't, the water cooler conversations just don't revolve around, what's a Netflix show that you're binging on, or, what's your favorite happy hour drink? It gets so much deeper. But then if you also do exercises around values, and so what I mean by that is actually everyone in the team doing this together, as being able to identify what might my purpose be and what might my values be, and being able to do that with saying, look at your own life and your highs and lows. And again, this is beyond happiness. So it's like not just the highs actually help us understand sustainable happiness, but it's actually our lows as well. And sitting with them and asking in each of those moments, highs and lows, what values were there or not there? What people were present or not present? That's when you can actually start identifying what means most to you. But doing this in a team environment with you as the leader, all of a sudden you get everyone's just not just buy-in, but contribution. And again, if you're not a CEO, you're a leader, you can actually create values for your team. You can create a higher purpose for your projects. And at the same time, every single member of your team can align their own personal ones to that of the greater organization or team. And the beauty of it is, once you start doing that, you actually see how much more people are alike and connected than disalike. And that's when you see that with all the disparities that are going on in the world and different opinions of life, we've seen so much divisiveness, whether it's political or social, economic, etc. That's when you see humanity get connected in most meaningful ways. And it just naturally, organically leads into the work we do and how we actually interact with each other as human beings.
Yeah, that's a great observation. Thank you, Jen. And I know that delivering happiness as an organization really digs into the research and the science behind happiness. And that actually ties in with a question that came in from Anna. Would love your thoughts about this. She's curious, how does age or gender or social status or other external factors impact the level of happiness?
Mm. There's definitely a lot of studies that have gone around this, and the short answer is that it can impact, but it doesn't have to. And the reason why is that if you can set the conditions to be equal, then the things like age and gender usually doesn't change in general. But we know that's not the case. We know we live in a global society. And so to be able to answer that question, knowing that, if you live in a certain country or region, there might be disparities in how you're treated. And so sometimes you'll see that in general, people that are, there's like kind of a bell curve, people start being happier when they're, growing in millennial age, 20s, 30s. They kind of peak out around 40s, midlife crisis, even though that's a Chip Conley thinks differently because he thinks it's actually a new awakening, which I totally agree with. And then it actually, when once you get to that midlife crisis, it bells up again as we age, get more grateful, appreciate the things we have, and figure out really what are, honing into our purpose and why we exist and how we spend our time. But why I say that, that's just a survey and that's just a study, I do believe and seen time and time again that you can, think about these external factors, but again, when you have and create these organizations that have this tied sense of common purpose, common values across it, those external factors don't matter as much. And I'll give you an example. So, someone that worked at Northwell Hospital, and he's a janitor, and his name is Luis. And Northwell, amazingly enough, especially for a hospital system, over these last, 18 months, they actually increased the level of score in Fortune 100's best places to work. And you can imagine how difficult that is for nurses and doctors and everyone in the staff. But Louise is a great example of what we can do regardless of, obviously, he's not the highest in the pay ladder, pay rung, but what he did was that he just showed up as himself, and he had a purpose. And so one of the patients that he had, uh, at the end of his experience, he told his son that he actually enjoyed the hospital. And his son was like, flabbergasted, like, how can anyone enjoy your hospital stay? And he was still sick. He's like, it's because of Louise. He brought the section of the sports section of the New York Times to me every day, and we talked about the Mets, and I'll never forget that. So, just an example, like, for him, Louise had that purpose of serving others, and we can do that in any role that we have. And till the very day that this patient passed away, he talked about that experience of how we can find that sense of happiness, intrinsic happiness, no matter what role we have in life or work.
I love it. That's a great anecdote to share. Thank you. We're here with Jenn Lim. Her website, jennlim.com, her book is Beyond Happiness. And we are book buddies. My book actually came out 3 weeks ago. It's The Long
Yay.
Game. So you can check that out as well if you enjoy some of the fruits of these conversations. And Jenn, a great question came in. Well, actually, first, there's an observation from David that I think is right on point. He says, curiosity energizes me when I know I'm being heard and that what I say has meaning and value to it. I think that is right on, David. Thanks for sharing that. And a question
Mm.
came in from Marion that I wanted to share, Jenn, and get your perspective on. Marion wants to know, as you developed your work, who are some of your influences from the world of positive psychology? How did you
Mm.
form your philosophy that you share in Beyond Happiness?
Yeah, so this whole field of positive psychology, as it's been evolving, it's, over the last several decades, it was really fascinating to me how, because I was just exploring these existential questions in my own life of like, wait, what am I doing this for again? Like, I got spit out of the .com, got laid off, and then went through my own hardships back in the day of going through 9/11 and going through the loss of my father 18 years ago now. So that's what brought me to positive psychology, because I realized there was a body of work that was actually answering these questions for me that has been, data research. So, number one, definitely the godfather of positive psychology, Marty Seligman. He's been there since day one, and he really pioneered the course of what this all can mean. Of course, he did it from an academic sense, and then we did our best to try and make it more practical in, the organizational business sense. Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi is another big one, and I like to say his, just to name him, because I like saying his name,
Yeah, well
and the
pronounced.
fact
Well done.
that the fact that I can get that down, that makes me kind of happy. But he was a pioneer of this concept called flow. And so flow, you might be familiar with it, Dory, and people in the audience. It's just like when you're doing something and you're so engrossed in it, and it feels like minutes have gone by, but actually hours have gone by. And you see it when, in athletes, um, you see it when people are like, writing or doing photography or painting. But the thing is, what I've learned in the last 11 years is that you can apply these concepts, flow and positive psychology, to the workplace. And so that was, yeah, what kind of kicked it off from these sort of early thought leaders. And originally, when people said, oh, yeah, you can do this at Zappos, you can make a happy culture at Zappos, but it'll never happen at my place, or my company. And so that fired me up. And I was like, I'm going to prove you wrong. That was my attempt. And luckily, through all the testing and experience, we've been able to show that every kind of company, no matter what size, where you are in the world, what industry, when you apply these universal concepts, it actually works. And you see the productivity and profitability, but you're seeing more meaningful lives.
Yeah, I think that's right on. And a question came through, Jen, from Kathleen, who's asking something that probably a lot of us feel in the COVID slash potentially post COVID world. She says, "How can we move forward when it seems like everything is at a standstill? For so long,
Yeah.
it feels like things just have been kind of treading water. If that is how someone is feeling, what would you suggest in order to be able to help snap out of the rut that so many of us find ourselves in, and be able to tap into some of these deeper meaning that we all
Mhm.
want to get to?"
Mhm. Yeah, I can totally relate. I mean, the whole world can relate to that, and it's still happening. And who knew that after all this time we would still be feeling this way? And my biggest suggestion is that to so I call this the adaptive age because in my book, and I talk about the fact that what we can do as human beings and individuals and how we can be authentic about it is to really control and change what we can within and embrace and adapt to the things that we can't control. So for me, I mean, we all felt like we were in Blur's day for however, how long when we were in total lockdown. And now that was just opening up, it's just still feeling like, wait, it's so like really tenuous outside. But what I found is that once you do those practices and do those exercises of that purpose and values, then you can actually take it day by day. Take it day by day so that when you wake up in the morning, you think about, what's in store for you for the rest of the day. Is this exactly how I want to be spending my time? Is this actually laddering up to what I most believe in? And, of course, the people I love and the things that are most meaningful to me. And so by asking yourself those questions, it's the little things that we realized over the course of the last 18 plus months of what means the most. And some things I've been saying, you want to stop, some things you want to stay, some things you want to start. And just make a list of those things, and it doesn't have to be for the rest of your life, just day by day. Start your day maybe, and then at the very end of it, just sit down for 5-10 minutes and reflect on what were the things that actually tapped into what means the most, how you wanna live your life. And it can come in all many different forms. It could be like, I'd rather, take a break of going outside for 5 minutes rather than, like, tuning in onto, no offense, getting online, or LinkedIn. You know what I mean? So these tiny things you'll get to see and actually experience what it does differently. And we know it not neuroscientifically, but now we know it to, now we have the space and time to do it. These little actions really amount to big impact in your life.
Yeah, well, definitely testing and evaluating and just continuing to pivot, I think, is so crucial in understanding what works for us. So that's a really great point. And I see new friends have tuned in. We have Minx here from Oakland. We have Lana from Dubai. We have Gail in
Oakland.
North Carolina. We have a LinkedIn user from Virginia, and many more. So thank you for typing in and saying hi. We're here with Jenn Lim. Again, you can learn more about her at jennlim.com, and you can make sure you never miss one of our weekly Newsweek interview shows. Just go to dorieclark.com/li for LinkedIn, and you can sign up and follow me and subscribe there. So, Jenn, a question that I have for you related to all of this: what is the role? This is something you talk about in your book, but can you tell more about what is the role of self-awareness when it comes to our purpose, to our happiness? How does that factor in? And what are the ways that we can just try to, we all have blind spots, but how can we amp up
Mhm.
our own self-awareness just a little bit more?
Yeah, awesome question, because it's such a huge part of it. Uh, it's a huge part of not just being authentic to ourselves, because a lot of people ask, "How do I show up authentically?" And that level or that element of being self-aware is not only huge in being authentic, it's also a big aspect of being happy. And we know that not just from these studies, but philosophically, like we've had, philosophers like Aristotle, Socrates back in the day. Of course, they had a lot more time to think about things than we do now because they were, philosophers by trade, but they came back to that thought of in one of the fundamental critical things of being happy. There are other, like it's having your pleasures in life. It's like having your purpose, as we've been talking about. But number one is having that self-awareness of being able to distinguish, what it is true and not true within your head. And what's helpful in that is also being surrounded by people that you can actually respect and trust, so that it's not just yourself telling you what's right and wrong. It's also being able to bounce these thoughts and get these more deeper dive conversations of whether or not these things hold true. And I think that's a constant sort of weaving and journaling and journeying of our lives, of asking ourselves these, questions. Am I who, what I think I am? And are people responding to me that way, especially people that you love and respect?
Yeah, thank you. Such an interesting observation. And Lana is chiming in with a question here. It's a philosophical one, so we'd love your take, Jen. She has a number of great questions, but one of them, she says, is it correct to say that what is beyond happiness is fulfillment? Yes or no?
Mhm.
What's your take? What
I,
does
I
lie beyond? Fill us in.
Yeah, I mean, I would say yes, that could be one of it. Yes, one way to say it. So, because actually, there's been a number of people that ask me that same exact question. It's like, what? How would you describe it? And what I have been responding with is that happiness is, it can be objective because there's science to it, but happiness is so subjective because it's like your fingerprint. You define it for yourself. And so I think that when you do go through these deep dives of these highs and lows and your shadow sides and your strengths, then you can actually define it for yourself. So for a lot of people, it's fulfillment. So a lot of people would say, actually, for me, it's joy, or whatever it is. And for me, I define it as not just fulfillment, but actually living a full life. And full meaning every moment of the day. I know that whether it's something amazing happened or something just kind of out of the blue, like, well, that really sucked. That to me, by the time the day is over, if I can look back and say I lived according to who I am authentically, then that's happiness. That's a full life.
Yeah, I think that's a great and useful definition. Thank you for that. And we probably have time for just one more question. Again, we're here with Jenn Lim. She's the author of Beyond Happiness. If you want to learn more, be sure to check out jenlim.com. Jen, the last thing that I'm curious about, you recently wrote about the components that are necessary to create sustainable happiness. Now, this is something that
Mhm.
I think a lot of people are interested in. Plenty of us, even during the mishigas of the pandemic, there were moments that you could seize and be happy, but there was a lot of challenges around it. What do you believe is the necessary recipe for sustainable happiness, and how we can begin to move toward that?
Mhm. So a lot of the questions that you've already asked, which has been awesome, is the basis of sustainable happiness. So as I mentioned at the very beginning, um, when we instill the purpose and values, and this is again not just the research lately, but Aristotle back in the day, he said happiness is the purpose of our existence, and he said even more importantly is that happiness is dependent on ourselves. So, of course, a lot of time has transpired since then, but that kind of thing still rings true. So, just remembering that that purpose sense of us is that core that sustains us over time, and it's been like over 2,000 years now that we've known this. But then it becomes in our everyday behaviors, and that's where the key is, and that's where a lot of people in a lot of companies and organizations have great values on the wall. We have a higher mission and purpose statement, but do they actually live it on a day-to-day basis? So unfortunately, the answer is still not really. And for us as human beings, at least as individuals, we can control that, though. What are the daily actions that we can do that really tap into what's most intrinsically happy for us, not the extrinsic stuff like getting a raise or a promotion, or whatever things that made us, or buying a new pair shoes, or whatever it is. Those are important in life, but unless we create this rhythm within ourselves, then we kind of lose track. And especially when the world, gets really chaotic around us, we lose track of ourselves, and we lose that foundation. So those are the two keys: really just ground ourselves purpose and values wise, and develop those behaviors and actions to support it.
A powerful reminder. Jenn Lim, author of Beyond Happiness. We're so pleased to have you here. Thank you to everyone tuning in. We're glad to have you here. We're here every Thursday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. And Jenn Lim, thank you for joining us this week.
Thank you, Dorie. Thank you, everyone for the great questions too.